Almost there.
Okay, there we go. Hey, if you're seeing us on Facebook Live, we have a live performance tonight of Lone Mountain at 8:10. So come back and join us at 8:10. Thank you so much. This is just a rehearsal for Lone Mountain. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my camera and mic, and I'll see you back at about 7:20, Jeff.
And
Sound
I'll do
good?
the same. Okay.
Thank you. Hey, Joe.
Hello.
How are you?
Okay.
Can you put us in record mode? If you're
Okay.
seeing us now, this is a technical setup for Lone Mountain, which begins at 8:10 tonight. So check back in Facebook Live for Lone Mountain. We start at 8:10. So are we recording?
We are recording.
Great. And let me check my camera. Up, 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 up. What happened? Okay, good. So, whoop, whoop, whoop. Okay, so I'm going to go away and I'll check back in with you around 8 o'clock.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Hey, Joe, you there?
I am here.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay.
Okay, how's the sound? Good.
Sound is good.
And the lighting here is good.
It's good.
Okay, great. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we will begin shortly with Lone Mountain. Yay! Okay. Joe, you still there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, can you feature me? Big?
You're starting now? All right.
No, I'm not starting now. I just wanted to make sure can you do me full screen?
I will need to stop the screen share if I do that.
Oh, okay. So that happens after the screen share.
Right, right.
Okay, so when I start, then we go into full screen as the screen share goes away.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Hello, I'm John Fisher, and this is Lone Mountain. Many months ago, I left this apartment and I went southeast up to the top of the park right next to my house, Buena Vista Park. And we discovered along the way the homes of, yes, Ambrose Bierce, Jack London, Gavin Newsom, Norma Talmadge, Janis Joplin, and Jimi Hendrix. And then we took the Walk O' Death. We entered Buena Vista Park and went all the way to the top on that dark, dark path. And we had to brave coyotes, there are coyotes in that park, predatory gay men, and nice middle-class people who've been outside drinking white wine and maybe had a little too much of it and were out to attack us. But we survived it, we did it. We survived the Walk O' Death. Then a few weeks later, I left northeast from this apartment and I went to the Fillmore. Along the way, we saw a huge statue of President William McKinley. And then we saw this beautiful house built by one of my favorite architects, Julia Morgan. We visited the John Coltrane Church. Then we went to the headquarters of KPOO Radio, KPOO, yes, on Divisadero. Then we went to Alamo Square and saw the former home of the great writer of The Color Purple, Alice Walker. That's where she lived when she had her affair with the great singer-songwriter Tracy Chapman. Then we went down into the Fillmore district to the Jazz district of the Fillmore, and we visited the former location of Jimbo's Bop City. And we learned about the vicious destruction by the city of San Francisco and the redevelopment agency of that wonderful working class Black neighborhood. But tonight, we're going to go northwest from this apartment on my bike, and we're going to visit Lone Mountain. And we're going to plant a gay flag at the top of Lone Mountain and make it gay. Yes, we're going to make it queer. It's so exciting. Now, along the way, we'll visit some of the architectural wonders, some of my favorite architectural sites, and talk about some of my favorite San Francisco architects. We'll take a trip back to the 60s, and then we'll surmount Lone Mountain, a Catholic mountain, a Jesuit mountain in the middle of San Francisco. And we'll go all the way to the top. And at the top, there's another Walk O' Death, except this time it's a Ride O' Death. It's steep, 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 but I'm hoping we'll make it. But there are a bunch of perils out there that we have to face. First of all, there's the cold. We don't want to get cold because this is COVID-19. If we get sick from something like a cold or the flu, we might get COVID-19. Also, there's traffic. COVID-19 has been terrible for driving. The driving is terrible out there, so we have to be careful. Also, we're entering private property. The University of San Francisco is a Jesuit school. It's a Catholic school. It's a private school. So we have to keep our eye open for security guards and Jesuits. They could be anywhere. And also, we have to be aware of COVID-19. And finally, at the very end, there's that wicked steep hill that goes all the way to the top of Lone Mountain. So we've got to watch out for that. Okay, all set? Let's get going. First of all, we got to be warm. So I've got on my special riding suit. This should keep me warm. Then I want to be safe. So I'm going to wear my helmet, as always. When I was a kid, I told you guys this a few months ago. I had a friend, and every time she and I left their house, her mother would say, "Oh, you're not going to wear helmets while you ride your bike? How nice of you. You're donating your organs to science. That's so generous of you." Think of all the people out there waiting for a kidney or a liver. They're going to be so happy to have your donated little kidneys and little livers. That's so nice of you. So we wear a helmet. Now, if we get in an accident, knock wood, we don't want to, but if we get in an accident, we want to have our insurance identification with us. So I'm taking my insurance card. There it is. If for some reason, knock wood again, I get knocked out, the paramedics will do a wallet biopsy. And I want them to find my insurance card because I've got great insurance through my wonderful husband, Michael, and that'll protect me. I'll get great medical assistance. Also, as always, we want to be COVID safe. So we're going to wear our mask the whole way to protect ourselves from that evil COVID. Then we've got our flag, our gay flag, which we're going to raise at the top of Lone Mountain. So we got to take our gay flag because that'll be the big moment. Pretty much all set. The next thing we need is our headset so you can hear me talk. Here it is. Now, fortunately, I have ears because they'll hold up the mouthpiece like this. Now we're going to put on our COVID-19 Zoom gloves. These are special gloves that I adapted myself from real gloves. You see, they've got COVID fingers, so I can manipulate the Zoom. Isn't that exciting? Okay, so let's unplug you from power and plug you into sound. You're plugged into sound. And now it's time to take you off the wall and put you on the bike. Here we go. Turn off the light first. We want to conserve energy. And now we're going to get onto my bicycle. There you are. You're on my bike. So let's turn on our handy front light. Look how bright that is for safety. And our blinking red backlight. You see it? Maybe you can see it reflected in my hand. Okay, I think we're all set. Let's head out into the wilderness of San Francisco during COVID-19. Here we go. Turn off the overhead light. There it goes. And now we're headed out the front door. Now, I'm going to lock the door because I've got a wonderful husband. He's been in my life for 35 years. I don't know what I'd do without him. And if for some reason he got kidnapped or taken away, I don't know what I'd do. I'd be so upset. So I'm going to lock him in for security. I know that doesn't sound PC, locking up your husband, but I want to keep him. People are kidnapping things now. Do you know that they kidnap French bulldogs? They're worth $6,000. They actually take them off the street. It's horrible. I want to hang on to my husband, so I'm going to lock him in. I think he's safe now. We're now leaving my building. This is a James Dunn building from 1904. It's built of wood, which meant that during the big earthquakes, it's been able to rock and roll and not fall down. It survived the 1906 earthquake and the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. It's not only incredibly well constructed, it's beautifully designed. Here's one of my favorite features right here, above my head. Do you see it? A head. Yes, a head above my head. It's got these glorious heads on it. Let's go down here a little way, and I'll show you another head. Do you see it? Right above my head? Yes, that's our apartment behind us with heads all over the facade. Let's cross the street. And as we do, look and see in the background, and you'll see this wonderful Victorian building. James Dunn, master San Francisco architect with an aesthetic all his own. We are now pointed down Central Avenue. This used to be the center of the city. So let's turn you around so you can see where we're headed. Look at that. It's our new fisheye lens, a whole new innovation for us. This was recommended to me by my friend, Henry Rosenthal, a distinguished filmmaker. How exciting is that? We're now headed off into San Francisco with our fisheye lens, headed down Central Avenue. We're going to turn left onto Haight Street. This is the spine, the backbone of the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood. Our first stop is Bound Together Books, the anarchist collective bookstore, one of the most unique bookstores in all of the United States. This place is amazing. It was started in 1976 by two men who were former love children from the Summer of Love, and they thought that a little more anarchy should be brought to San Francisco. They've been paying market rate on this place. I keep thinking it might disappear, but it hasn't yet. We're so lucky. They have every year the Anarchist Book Fair, which they organize, and they also take anarchist books to the prisons so that the prisoners have a variety of reading. Look at that, Bound Together Books, the anarchist collective bookstore. Now, I never thought of myself as an anarchist or a socialist or a communist, so I never went in this place. Well, one day I ventured in and I realized that they had a huge section on gay and lesbian theory. So I was the anarchist without even knowing it, just because I'm gay. Isn't that amazing? So let's step over here.
They also have a full selection of Dover thrift books. Those are those wonderful books, the classics that anybody can afford because they're so cheap, $1, sometimes even less. So let's look at this mural. This mural is by Susan Green and is called Anarchists in America. And these are all the famous anarchists from the 19th and 20th century. Let's read what it says. History remembers two kinds of people, those who murder and those who fight back. Anarchism strives toward a social organization which will establish well-being for all. Isn't that nice? But before we leave the mural, as I said, it's by Susan Green. Look way up in the corner. Do you see? You can just see it up there. There's an anarchist cat. Yes, that's the Anarchist Collective Bookstore cat. And there's another one up in that corner. Two anarchist cats. Isn't that cute? Even cats can be anarchists. Now, two of the anarchists portrayed are Sacco and Vanzetti. Sacco and Vanzetti were accused of murdering a security guard and a paymaster. Well, they didn't do it. They were innocent, but they were found guilty and executed simply because they were immigrants and anarchists. A woman who rose to defend them was Emma Goldman, one of the most famous anarchists of the 20th century. She was born in Russia, then she moved to Prussia, then she immigrated to the United States. She fought for everybody. She wanted the world to be free. Well, the US government didn't like her, especially J. Edgar Hoover. Yeah. Yeah. J. Edgar Hoover didn't like Emma Goldman, so he actually exiled her. I didn't even know you could exile somebody from the United States. Let's stop here and look quickly across the street. Across the street, you see a place that we visited last time. This is the safe house that the Simonese Liberation Army hid Patty Hearst in before they took her to other safe houses. This is the first one right here on Masonic Avenue. Eventually, as you know, Patty joined the SLA to save herself, changed her name to Tanya, eventually was found and thrown in jail herself. Now, Emma Goldman was exiled, thrown out of the country. She went to Russia to see how communism was developing. She didn't like Russia, didn't like Moscow at all. So then she went to France and ended up in Saint-Tropez, in the Côte d'Azur. Now, somehow that's appropriate because Saint-Tropez is the gay capital of France. And Emma Goldman had started out her life, as it turns out, as a lesbian. She had a lesbian lover when she was a child by the name of Petrushka. Look across the street here, and you see a magnificent row of San Francisco Victorians. Aren't those princely? Magnificent. Like a bunch of royal squires. Incredible. It's hard to believe that at the end of the 19th century, many San Franciscans didn't like Victorians. They thought they were glowering, overpowering. Prima donnas, too European, too dominant. One of these San Franciscans was a man named Willis Polk. He resisted the Victorian aesthetic. He said it was too much and had nothing to do with San Francisco. So in 1904, he built the structure in front of us, All Saints Episcopal Church. Now, Willis Polk was a member of the first Bay tradition of architects. This building, as I said, was built in 1904. Now, the principles of the first Bay tradition of architects were the following. Here it is, All Saints Episcopal Church. Now, the traditions were locally sourced materials, in this case, wood, shingles, simple, practical construction, but delicacy of design. It also defers to the rest of the neighborhood. It doesn't dominate it like the Victorians. Isn't that magnificent? Look at all of those intersecting peaks rising up into the sky. Across at the top, a beautiful stained glass window, lovely on the street and inviting, just as a church should be. Magnificent. Compared to the Victorians across the street, huge, glowering, but gorgeous in their own way. Louis Polk hated the Victorians, but I love them. And I love the way they compliment his church and the way his church compliments them. All Saints Episcopal Church from 1904. Well, Michael and I lived here for a number of months, a number of years ago, and it was magnificent inside. It's like a mini version of Grace Cathedral. It has the choir, it has the altar. It really is magnificent. High church. And we were thrilled to discover an all gay and lesbian congregation inside, led by a wonderful gay man, Father Schmidt. That was a wonderful visit to this wonderful church by Willis Polk. Now, Willis Polk wasn't just a First Bay tradition architect. He could do anything. Here's one of my other favorite buildings by Willis Polk. Joe, could you show us the Halliday building? Look at that. That's like a completely modernist structure, a building made of steel and glass. Most buildings like that were built after World War II, but this was built long before. Willis Polk could do anything. Here's another favorite building of his, of mine. This is the Merchants Exchange building. There it is. Look at that. Completely the opposite. And not like the shingled church we just saw. A classical building. How exciting. Now I have a personal connection to this building because my father had his law offices in this building. And also, one of my favorite architects of all time, Julia Morgan, had her office here. But what I loved best about it was when my father took me to the banking hall. Here's the banking hall in the Merchants Exchange building. Look at that. It had pictures of the old harbor up on the walls. And here it is, filled with all of the most important men in San Francisco. What are they doing? They just decided to launch the PPIE, the Panama Pacific International Exposition, in 1915. This was a World's Fair to show the world that San Francisco was back on the map. In 1915, it would prove that San Francisco had completely recovered from the devastating earthquake and fire of 1906. We're now headed up Ashbury, and we're going to visit what is known as the Grateful Dead House here at 710 Ashbury. There it is, the Grateful Dead House, a magnificent Queen Anne Victorian. Isn't that delightful? Now, this was known as the unofficial city hall of the Haight-Ashbury, because this is where the Grateful Dead were. Also, the Haight-Ashbury Legal Organization was headquarters here. They provide free legal advice to the Flower children. Isn't that wonderful? In October 1967, the police broke into this building and arrested 2 of the Grateful Dead. And it's said that that was the end of the 60s. Of course, the 60s wasn't the entire 60s. As Peter Fonda said in the wonderful movie, The Limey, the 60s was part of 1967 and all of 1966. Just about 1 2/3 years. That was the 60s. It all came to an end in this building when the police broke in. If we look up and down this row, we see a series of Queen Anne Victorians, all designed by Robert Dickey Cranston in the 1890s. Aren't these lovely? I love Willis Polk, but I think his stuff only works because it's complemented by such wonderful rows of Queen Anne Victorians like this. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. Who cares? I'm not a Deadhead. I don't like the music of the Grateful Dead. Well, I used to feel that way too. As a matter of fact, I felt that way for a long, long time. And then my wonderful husband introduced me to a terrific Grateful Dead album, Terrapin Station. I really recommend this album to anybody who's not a Deadhead. It's got a ton of melody, real smooth jazz, a lot of energy, but it's very calming. It's the perfect mom rock album. And that's what I love, mom rock. I mean, I used to just love musical comedy, but now I love Mom Rock. And Terrapin Station is terrific. If you've never thought you could love a Grateful Dead album, listen to Terrapin Station. We're now headed down Waller Street to our next stop, which is the Hamilton Methodist Episcopal Church on Waller Street. Now, the first Hamilton Methodist Episcopal Church was made of unreinforced concrete, and in 1906, it collapsed. A second one was built, and this is the one we'll visit. Now, I'm sure Willis Polk would say that this is everything he hates in Victorian architecture. Here it is, and let's take a look at it. Built after the earthquake and still standing is this glorious edifice. Look at that. I love the way it commands the street. Look at the cross and the peak. Isn't that magnificent? A real stunner. But this isn't what we came here to see. In 1923, the Hamilton Methodist Episcopal Church decided it needed more space. It needed a gymnasium and offices. So it hired the incredible Julia Morgan to do the extension. Julia Morgan, you remember from San Simeon, Hearst Castle, that magnificent building in the middle of California. Well, she also did very simple buildings, but elegantly. She too, like Willis Polk, was a member of the first Bay tradition of architects. And just look at the simplicity and delicacy and yet charm of this delightful building. The diamond-shaped windows, next to the arch windows, next to the rectangular windows with the square beneath them. Isn't that delicious? I just love what she could do with massing. She was a shapeshifter, just like Willis Polk. She could spend a ton of money or very little, but she always delivered great beauty. Julia Morgan, one of my favorites. Now, this church is famous because in 1985, it opened the Haight Street Family Center, which was the first homeless shelter in San Francisco, a landmark. In 1983, it started the Haight-Ashbury Food Program, which has been feeding people ever since. Now, around the corner here, the wall used to be painted with a glorious mural by a man named Codbell. The mural was called "The Spirit of Youth in America." Well, it's been eradicated, painted over. So the Haight still has the anarchists of America, but it doesn't have the spirit of youth in America. Gone. I've had my own Julia Morgan experience. Years ago, I was cast in a play, and I was told that my costume would be a bathing suit. Well, I freaked out. I thought, you better get in shape, kid. So I started working out. Mainly, I started swimming. Fortunately, at UC Berkeley, there's a glorious Julia Morgan pool, the Hearst Pool. Joe, can you show us the pool? Look at that. That's why I swam every day. What a privilege. It soars above the campus, outdoors, and you're surrounded by these beautiful sculpted gods and goddesses. It made me feel like Zeus, Aphrodite, and Neptune all wrapped into one. What a great place to swim. I felt truly regal and ethereal. Magnificent. We're back on Haight Street now, and we're approaching Wasteland, a vintage clothing store. And there it is in front of us, Wasteland. Isn't that precious? Look at that. Magnificent. Wasteland was designed by a man named Bernard J. Joseph in 1907. It was designed to be originally a theater, the Superba Theater, a movie theater. But now it's a vintage clothing store. I just love the details and that massive arch. It is incredible. Now, Joseph also designed one of my favorite theaters in San Francisco, the Orpheum Theater. That was the first place I ever saw a Broadway show. It was on tour, and it's one of my favorite musicals ever, on the 20th century. And when it was on tour, it starred Rock Hudson. Joe, can you show us Rock Hudson? Oh my goodness, there is Rock Hudson. Look at that. My goodness. Tall and handsome and live on stage. I couldn't believe it. I took my friend Jessica Lutz. She was my bud, and she was really into musical theater. I had the best time watching this show. Incredible. Rock Hudson. And at intermission, Jessica turned to me and said, Rock Hudson can't sing. I said, phooey, he's singing well enough, and he's tall and handsome. Who cares? Look at him in that smoking jacket. I can't get over it. Hey, if you ever want to have a big thrill in the theater, go see a matinee that has old-time movie stars in it. The audience goes crazy. They worshiped Rock Hudson. He's the best movie star ever for one reason. He's got the best name ever. And he's exquisitely tall and handsome. I couldn't get over it. So let's look at a building across the street from Wasteland. This is an old bank building that's been turned into decades of fashion. Isn't that charming? I spent a lot of time in this store because when I was doing Present Laughter, I had to buy a whole bunch of dressing gowns because Noel Coward plays, like stuff that Rock Hudson is, are full of dressing gowns. So I had to stock up on the dressing gowns. I'll tell you something else about Rock Hudson. In researching this piece, I actually found a recording of one of the songs from the show, and his singing was fine. I mean, he didn't have a lot of power, but he certainly knew how to hit the notes. It was charming. The problem is his predecessor in the role was John Cullum, one of the greatest musical comedy singers of all time, with an almost operatic voice. My favorite. Still, Rock Hudson made me a fan that afternoon. Here across the street, on Haight Street, is another James Dunn apartment building. Isn't this magnificent? This is just like our building. Lots of Parisian influences. And you see that the front of his buildings often look like the back of Spanish galleons. That wonderful Parisian influence. If you look way up there at the top, you might be able to see some heads, some lions' heads up at the top of those windows. Magnificent. Now, James Dunn was not a trained architect. When he built buildings like ours in 1904, and this one that we just saw in 1910, he was a self-trained builder. He taught himself how to build, did apprenticeships, and then got a lesson in design in the best way possible. He traveled to Paris and to the continent and studied European architecture. Incredible. He also had philosophies about how to build. He said builders and architects in San Francisco who built with unsteel reinforced bricks were criminals because those buildings were going to collapse. Buildings should be built of wood and reinforced, steel reinforced bricks. Sure enough, when the '06 earthquake hit, buildings like our own, James Dunn, made of wood, rocked and rolled and didn't fall down. And the unreinforced brick buildings collapsed. James Dunn died tragically young at 47, leaving a lot of apartment buildings in the city. He was a great believer in apartment buildings, the democracy of building apartments. He built some houses, but his apartment buildings are the glorious things. If you ever have a weekend, download a list of his buildings, drive around, and treat yourself to the glories of James Dunn. I just wanted to stop in this parking lot because there's this wonderful mural paying tribute to three of the true greats of the Haight-Ashbury: Jerry Garcia, Jimi Hendrix, and Janis Joplin. And there's the Grateful Dead. I just love it. Murals all over the city, but in the hate, they celebrate the hate. Isn't that just charming? Now, as I said, I don't consider myself a deadhead, but Terrapin Station is a delight. I recommend that. It'll convert you. And I never understood Janis Joplin or Jimi Hendrix, not my kind of music, until I watched them on YouTube. My goodness, did I admire their performance skill. They are live phenomenon. You've got to see them. It's not what they sing, it's how they sing it and what they do with their bodies and their commitment. I was so amazed. I've become a fan, and I'm proud to live in the Haight where they thrived. We're now on Haight Street again, coming to the end of Haight Street. You see that it just crashes into Golden Gate Park in front of us. On the left is the former location of the Haight-Ashbury McDonald's. Nobody liked McDonald's for years, and eventually it was torn down. But before the new building could be built, COVID-19 struck. And what we have now is what detractors call Camp Preston. Our supervisor, Dean Preston, decided that people living with homelessness need to be helped in this pandemic. So he set up this camp to give them services, help them maintain social distancing, and help them fight the onset of COVID-19. Now, a lot of homeless people living with homelessness, don't want to be in a camp. That's exactly right on the street. They don't want to be confined. So many of them set up outside the camp in locations like this, so they could be near it for services, but didn't have to be fenced in. Well, I think this camp is terrific. It speaks to the very best in all of us. It's there to help people in this horrible crisis. Now, Dean Preston unseated the previous supervisor, Valley Brown. He's an independent. There was recently an election, and Valley Brown tried to get her supervisorial seat back from Dean Preston. She focused her campaign on things like Camp Preston, on the homeless. She said that Dean Preston is creating a blight in the Haight-Ashbury. These homeless encampments designed to help people living with homelessness in this pandemic are ugly. And she appealed to the homeowners of the Haight-Ashbury to elect her. If she was in office, she would eradicate the camps. Outrageous. This is where we're supposed to be helping people. Fortunately, Dean Preston was reelected and Valley Brown was not. My goodness, this is a tragedy. It's like Frankie Roosevelt and the New Deal. We've got to help people. We can be snobs about home ownership later, if at all. But right now, like Dean Preston, I believe that these people need to be helped. Fortunately, Valley Brown was not elected and Dean Preston is still in office. We're now turning into Golden Gate Park. Look at this. Even in the midst of the pandemic, they built this glorious cafe. Isn't that charming? Look at that. And right next to it, they built the first ever, in this part of the park, bocce ball court. Isn't that great? A little bit of Europe in the middle of Golden Gate Park. Look at the lights. How charming. Even in the midst of a pandemic, new things happen. What a glorious city it is. We're now in Golden Gate Park, John McLaren's masterpiece. The idea for Golden Gate Park came in 1868 when Frederick Law Olmsted, the great landscape designer, said that San Francisco needed a park like New York City's Central Park, which he designed. San Franciscans needed someplace to escape to the greenery, to get away from the rigors of the city. Well, Olmsted was not the person who built it. The person who built it was John McLaren, a Scotsman. And Scotland is famous for creating landscape architects, especially in the 19th century. He came to San Francisco. He started working on the park in 1871, and he worked on it until he died. It was his life's work, and how magnificent it is. Generally acknowledged to be much more successful than New York's Central Park. He created wooded areas, lawns, copses, lakes. He said his first principle was that he never, ever, ever wanted there to be a sign in Golden Gate Park that said, "Stay off the grass." He wanted people to feel like they could go on the grass anytime they wanted. We're now approaching what is known as Hippie Hill. Hippie Hill is at the end of this meadow, off there in the darkness. Hippie Hill is famous. It's a holdover from the 60s, the Flower Children. You can come here and see drum circles, hippies, and a lot of marijuana smokers. As a matter of fact, this is ground central for 420. On April 20th, every year, thousands of people gather here and puff away. For years, they were doing it because they wanted marijuana to become legal. Well, now it is legal, and they're still doing it. It is crazy. Now, I was here one April 20th, and at about 4:15, everybody started inhaling, but they didn't exhale. They just held it in and kept inhaling. And at 4:20 p.m. on April 20th, they all exhaled, creating a massive cloud of marijuana. Suddenly, we're in a Valhalla, a smoke city of weed. It was magical. I didn't inhale, I just observed. Now, people often ask, where does the name 420 as an identifier for marijuana smoking come from? Well, it's not Bob Marley's birthday. That's a myth. He was born in February. It's not a police code for, look, there's some marijuana smokers, let's bust them. It's not an ironic reference to Hitler's birthday, which is April 20th. In fact, it comes from my neck of the woods, Marin County. I went to high school at Redwood High, but another high school in the Tamalpais Unified School District was San Rafael High. At San Rafael High, there was a group called the Waldos. The Waldos were inveterate marijuana smokers. They just loved to puff away. And they had a code, 420 Louis. What did that mean? It meant that at 4:20 p.m., they would meet at the statue of Louis Pasteur. Joe, can you show us the statue of Louis Pasteur at San Rafael High? Isn't that adorable? That is by the great San Francisco sculptor, Beniamino Bufano. And whenever the code went out, 420 Louis, the Waldos, the marijuana smokers, would gather there. Why? To get high? Well, yes, of course. But also they were on a mission. One of them had acquired a secret map. The map was of secret marijuana fields located in Point Reyes next to the Coast Guard station. And when they met there at 4:20, they'd head out to Point Reyes to try and find the secret marijuana fields. Isn't that crazy? That's where 420 comes from. Don't let anybody else lay claim to that. It comes from San Rafael High and the search, 420 Louis, for the secret marijuana fields of Point Reyes near the Coast Guard station. Here we have McLaren Lodge. McLaren Lodge was built in 1895 by a man named E.R. Swain. It's a superb example of Richardsonian Romanesque. Richardson was an architect in Boston, and he built these beautiful Romanesque type buildings. Look at that glorious sandstone, the luscious red roof. Wonderful. I've seen his structures in Boston, and they are magnificent. But he influenced architects in San Francisco like E.R. Swain, and these are delicious too. I just love them. There are a couple here. The Carousel Building is Richardsonian Romanesque, and the Art Center. I encourage you to check them out. This was built for John McLaren. He wanted to retire, but he wouldn't let himself. At 60, he didn't retire. At 70, he kept working, kept building the park. They even gave him a dispensation which said he would never have to retire. And at 92, they threw him a massive celebratory dinner to celebrate his 92 years and all the years he spent in Golden Gate Park building this wonderful civic gift. He died at 97 here in McLaren Lodge, built for him so that he could be near his place of work. It is now the park headquarters. Now, not everybody wanted there to be a park. The big four rail barons, the men who built California with their railroads, the four of them wanted to turn this area into a big racetrack. Well, the government of San Francisco, the Board of Supervisors, and the people of San Francisco voted no. They wanted a park. And so we have Golden Gate Park. Thanks to the people, the Board of Supervisors, and the wonderful John McLaren. We're now going to head up Lone Mountain, and we're going to see our first Catholic edifice. Lone Mountain is basically a big Catholic mountain in the middle of San Francisco. The first edifice is St. Mary's Hospital. St. Mary's Hospital opened in 1857. It was opened by the Sisters of Mercy. The Sisters of Mercy were nuns and nurses in Dublin, Ireland. They were asked to come to San Francisco by the California legislature and by the Board of Supervisors in 1855 with the authorization of the Archdiocese of San Francisco. They were invited to come here and promised money to help the indigent people of San Francisco who were suffering from the cholera epidemic. It was called the Asiatic cholera, and it had arrived on the USS Uncle Sam. Now, Asiatic cholera is ridiculous. Nobody really knew where it came from. But then, as now, people wanted to blame China for the virus. The cholera was sweeping across the city. The government was desperate. Somebody needed to take care of the indigent, what we would now call people living with homelessness. The Sisters of Mercy volunteered, and the entire order came to San Francisco. They made an arduous crossing of the Atlantic, made an arduous crossing of Nicaragua to get to the Pacific, and then sailed through the stormy Pacific all the way to San Francisco. They got here, reported to the county hospital, and immediately began focusing on caring for the indigent in this horrible epidemic. Then, the legislature of California and the Board of Supervisors reneged on their promise and withdrew the money promised to be given to the sisters to take care of the indigent in the epidemic. They took the money away. The Sisters of Mercy left the county hospital and founded St. Mary's Hospital, specifically at first to help the indigent during the cholera epidemic of 1855. Now, of course, this is a modern hospital, but if you go inside, you pass through many parts of it that are very, very old. It's like traveling back in time. It's fascinating. And across the street is a much older version. This, of course, is not from 1857, but it is older than the one across the street, probably 20s or 30s. It's amazing. Then as now, government struggling, trying to decide, will we help people or will we not? It's incredible. It gets back to the Dean Preston Valley Brown controversy. Aren't we going to help people in this crisis? Well, thank goodness for the Sisters of Mercy and St. Mary's Hospital. They helped the indigent, the people living with homelessness through that pandemic. We're going to take a left turn and go up a very steep hill. I hope we make it. And as we do, I'll relate my personal experience of St. Mary's Hospital. I was a patient in St. Mary's Hospital in 2012. My doctor told me that I had a hernia and it had to be fixed, so I'd have to have an operation. I came in, I had an operation, it went well. And then in 2015, I had another hernia, so that had to be operated on. Now, the staff here was great, and they gave me tons of great drugs in preparation for the operation. It was supposed to be a local anesthetic, but it totally knocked me out. And after the operation, when I woke up, my husband, Michael, said I was loopy. I was laying on my back saying, "You guys are great. This hospital is wonderful. I love everyone. You're all so beautiful. I love you, I love you, I love you." I would not shut up. Well, the operations went well, but I very quickly realized that if I didn't start taking care of myself, surgeons would. So I started exercising, eating right, and taking responsibility for my own health. Now, the operations had a glorious benefit, which also turned into a glorious liability, because I was sent home with a little bottle of codeine. I'd never had codeine. I loved it. After those operations, I'd sit on my sofa, pop some codeine, and then fall backwards in bliss, a blissful slumber. I was like one of those characters in the movie Trainspotting. I was an addict for 3 days. The thing that persuaded me that I had to cut out the codeine was that I also became constipated. I was so backed up. A word to the wise. Don't become a drug addict if you like to have your bowel movements. I realized then that I would never be a successful heroin addict because I love my bowel movements. Drugs are not for people who like to have their relief in the morning. Constipation is the price of drug use. It's a well-kept secret, but they should tell children that. So I was a 3-day drug addict, and then I kicked it because I got sick of constipation. And here in front of me is the glorious University of San Francisco campus. Look at that. St. Ignatius Church rising gloriously, golden, into the San Francisco sky. Amazing. But I want to cross the street first to look at something else. We'll come back to St. Ignatius. The campus of the University of San Francisco was founded in 1855. Originally, it wasn't here. Originally, it was on Van Ness, and it was there until 1906. It managed to survive the earthquake, but it didn't survive the fire. The fire burned down the entire campus, tragically. So they moved the campus up here, and it slowly grew on this mountain, Lone Mountain. Now we're going to cross the street and take a look at a very unique building. This building fascinates me. It is actually a Carmelite monastery, part of the larger Catholic community on Lone Mountain. This building was built in 1956 through 1958 by a local architect named Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan decided that the best structure for a Carmelite monastery would be something in the Spanish Baroque style. Look at this. Isn't this charming? Spanish Baroque from 56, 57. If you look up there, hello, am I back? I think I must be.
You are
Am I
back. You are back.
Thank you. Thank you. If you look at this structure, it is Spanish Baroque. If you look on top, way up at the top there, you'll see the Madonna and Child. What a charming building. There's a little tower. It's all so old-fashioned and wonderful. It looks like it fell right out of Spain. What's amazing about it, it was built in 56, 58. Nobody was building buildings like that then. That was the era of modernism. Buildings weren't supposed to look like that. They weren't supposed to look old, like they were from Spain. They were supposed to look like the building in front of me, this law school across the street. Steel and glass, big solid buildings with lots of air and light going into them. That was modernism. This behind me, this wasn't modernism. This was something else entirely. That's what I love about the architect Paul Ryan. He asserted himself. He wasn't fashionable. He did what he thought was best. So here we are passing the law school, which I think is sort of typical modernism. There you see it. Glass, steel, lots of windows. Nothing compared to Charles J. Devlin's masterpiece, St. Ignatius Church. Isn't this glorious? Now, this is an amazing structure. Its plan is Roman Basilica. Its architecture is Italian Renaissance, and much of its decoration is Baroque. In that way, it's a summation of the spread of Christianity. Founded in the Roman Empire, reaching its greatest glory in the Italian Renaissance, and made international in the Baroque. That is Christianity summed up. Rising 210 feet tall, visible all over San Francisco. The Prince of Lone Mountain. So let's cross the street and enter the University of San Francisco campus. Remember, this is private property. So we have to watch out for security guards and Jesuits. As I said, USF was founded in 1855, but it was destroyed in the fire of 1906 and rebuilt up here. Its motto is Pro Urbe et Universitate, for the city and the university. So it wasn't just for the university, it was also for the city of San Francisco, a gift to the city. And here we enter it, an oasis, an Elysium glade in the middle of San Francisco. Beautiful lawns, lovely, pleasing architecture. Most of the buildings were built between 1927 and the present, many of them by the Pfluger family of architects. Let's look at the back of St. Ignatius, because this building just keeps on giving. Look at that. A campanile. It's like you're in Venice or Siena. Wonderful. With a bell at the top. And right next to it, the most charming dome in San Francisco with a glorious lantern on top. A building that just never stops. I recommend going inside of it. It is glorious. In front of me is Kamenovitz Hall. I came to the University of San Francisco in 1982. I was going to San Francisco State, but I wanted to act. I was desperate to be in a show, preferably a musical. So I came to the University of San Francisco, and I went directly to the College Players. The College Players were founded in 1863, and they are the longest continuously running student-produced college theater company west of the Mississippi. They were headquartered in the theater inside this building, the Gill Theater. I went there and there was an audition notice for an audition that day for a new musical called Tom Sawyer, based on Mark Twain's classic. The music was by Loggins and Messina. I auditioned. The director walked into the office and I overheard him say, "Well, I think we found our Tom Sawyer." I was so excited. I was going to be in a musical about Tom Sawyer, and I would be Tom. I was thrilled. Now, I'd go inside and perform my big song from the show, but the Gill Theater isn't there anymore. It was destroyed. When this building was completely redone in 2012, they eliminated the Gill Theater. But I can show you something else that was added, which I really like. I think it's a treat, maybe even better than the good old Gill Theater. So let's head around behind the building. Let's stop one last time. I can't get over St. Ignatius. Too much fun. There's the Campanile, that glorious dome in the background, and soaring up into the sky, the towers of the facade. It just doesn't get any better. Here we are, headed around behind the building. In front of us is the library, which has grown over the years. I used to go there and study when I was in graduate school. It was close to our house, quiet, and nobody seemed to care that I was using their facility. It was a great library. I want to take a brief detour here and look at the big seal for the University of San Francisco. Now, the seal, the character on the seal is the phoenix, and you'll see it rising from the flames. And underneath it, the motto of the University of San Francisco. Why the phoenix? Because the phoenix is a symbol of rebirth. And the University of San Francisco and San Francisco were reborn from the rubble of the great earthquake and fire of 1906. There it is, the phoenix rising from the flames, done in glorious tile work. And it says, Pro Urbe et Universitate, for the city and the university, a gift to San Francisco. So now we're going to head to where Gill Theater used to be. What I loved about Tom Sawyer was the people who were in it. They were just like my friends from high school who I loved to do theater with. I mean, in high school, everybody was gay, but we didn't really know it. Here, everybody was gay, but they knew it. It was amazing. And that doesn't mean there was a lot of sex. I mean, I was like a total virgin, but I loved being around all those musical comedy queens because that's exactly what I was. It was so much fun. It was like being back in high school. Wonderful. I wasn't a very good singer, but I had potential. Oh, I have a raccoon running beside me. Yes, indeed. The wildlife is coming out during COVID-19. Oh, let's say hello to our raccoon friend. Oh, I scared him with my headlight. Did you see him? Yes, indeed. I hope a coyote doesn't get him. I think I heard raccoons being eaten by coyotes the other night. It wasn't pretty. I wasn't a great singer. I mean, but I could be better. The music director is a wonderful man named Rick Roberts. He worked with me on my singing, and he got me singing about as good as Rock Hudson. Well, I wasn't tall and devastatingly handsome with a cool name like Rock, but I did pretty good on those numbers. Rick Roberts is still here, training students how to sing, leading 4 or 5 choirs himself. Every time I run into a student who knows Rick, they go on and on about how much they love Rick Roberts. He is a miracle worker. I mean, if he can get somebody like me to sing, that speaks for itself. Here was the door to the college players. It wasn't this nice door that they have now. It was an old wooden door that didn't really lock very well, but I loved it. So here's what I wanted to show you. Out behind where Gill Theater used to be, the back wall was actually this wall to my left. They've built a charming amphitheater. Isn't this just the cutest thing? Wow, a Roman style amphitheater behind Calvinowitz Hall, actually behind where the Gill Theater used to be. This is delightful. Now, the Roman amphitheater had a skene, or sort of a temple at the back of it, behind the stage. Well, they gave this theater a temple too, because there, behind the stage, is a portal brought to the University of San Francisco from Spain. This is a portal from the Church of Santa Maria de Obia from 1650, a Baroque portal from the town of Trio in Spain. How did it get to the University of San Francisco? Well, in 1931, William Randolph Hearst, buying up stuff to put into his new palace, Hearst Castle at San Simeon, bought this. But Julia Morgan couldn't fit it in. He had bought too much stuff. He had warehouses and warehouses full of stuff. She put in everything. If you've been to San Simeon, you know that. So this stayed in storage. I wonder how the people in Trio, Spain felt about this being sold. Anyway, years later, an heir of his donated it to the University of San Francisco in 2002. And in 2012, it was integrated into the redesign of Kalminovitz Hall. So even though Gill Theater was torn out and a convention center and offices put in, there's still this charming amphitheater with this glorious temple right behind where the old theater used to be. So I thought, since I can't do it at Gill Theater where I did it originally, I would stand on this little stage and perform for you my big song from Tom Sawyer. This is written by Loggins and Messina. It's called Something Inside of Me. And this is the song that I sang in the first act to my girlfriend, Becky Thatcher. You'll remember that she is Tom Sawyer's girlfriend. So here it goes. Something inside of me is making me feel this way. Something inside of me is making it hard to say whenever I'm near you. You got me thinking of you. I know. And then it went on. I love singing that song. I had a great Becky Thatcher too. What a delightful production that was. My San Francisco premiere. I'd acted a lot in Marin County, but this was my SF debut. We had a great time in that show. We used to go down to the Haight-Ashbury. That was my introduction to the Haight, to a place called All You Need. And we just eat tons of food, drink Cokes, and talk and talk and talk. We were crazy. Now, I'll tell you something. At the time, I was a callow youth, and I was given to making sort of obnoxious remarks. I would say anything for a laugh. But one night at rehearsal, I said something very inappropriate to a young woman in the cast. She got very upset. I felt bad. I apologized to her. And she said, that's all right. I'm having a rough time right now. I said, no. I shouldn't have said that. I'm really sorry. She said, it's fine. And she gave me a big hug, and we never mentioned it again. It turns out that she was rehearsing and performing at night in Tom Sawyer. And during the day, she was in court giving testimony because she had been raped on campus in this dormitory in front of me. A University of San Francisco basketball player named Quentin Daly entered this young woman's room and verbally, physically, and sexually assaulted her. He was arrested and went to court and stood trial. She gave testimony. He was found guilty. He was given a 3-year suspended sentence. Basically, he got off. He never acknowledged his crime or apologized for it. It later came out that a basketball fan had given him a $5,000 no-show job, a job he didn't even have to show up for, just a $5,000 gift. When the chancellor of the University of San Francisco, a man named Losquiavo, found out, he called a press conference and he said this was outrageous, a crime without punishment and a bribe to bring a star basketball player to our campus. The basketball team and the basketball team supporters have behaved without integrity. He said that is the end of basketball at the University of San Francisco, and he disbanded the team. After these events transpired, the young woman in Tom Sawyer brought a civil action against Quentin Daly, and he settled for $100,000, which she received, and he actually apologized. Very sad. The stories that work beneath the performers in a musical. Now, I don't want to sympathize with the perpetrator, and I don't. What happened to my friend was terrible. But Quentin Daly had a rough life. He was born in Baltimore in 1961, and a month after he was born, both of his parents died. The only thing he was good at was basketball, and all through high school, he shined, such that when he graduated, 200 college basketball teams offered him scholarships to their schools if he would come and play for them. The University of San Francisco had a great team at the time, and he chose to come to the University of San Francisco. After the events that transpired, and it turning out that he'd been bribed and given a lot of cushy things, he left the university and was immediately recruited by the Chicago Bulls. He played well for them, was named Rookie of the Year by the NBA for the 1982-83 basketball season. But he had a rough time in the NBA and the Chicago Bulls. He struggled mightily. He drank a lot. He did drugs. He gained weight. He missed practices and games. And eventually he was eclipsed by Magic Johnson. He was 10 years in the NBA, and he died at the early age of 49, divorced and working for the Clark County Park and Recreation Department. He said that nobody had ever taught him about right and wrong. He had to figure it all out for himself. And he said, I have erred greatly. Again, I don't want to show sympathy for a perpetrator, but he had a sad, difficult life that made my friends suffer. Well, on a happier note, once a college player, always a college player. Years later, I was asked back to the University of San Francisco college players to direct. It was a great experience. I directed Amateurs and The Mystery of Edward Dream. Now, while we were working on the project, they dug up an old picture of me and Tom Sawyer. And I was 18 and had the longest hair I've ever seen in my life. I had never had hair that long until today. I've not had a haircut since March. My hair has never been longer. I'm waiting until a vaccine. When I get vaccinated, I'll cut my hair. Right now, it's just getting long and crazy. Now, when I was hired as a director of the college players, I had to sign a contract with the University of San Francisco. Most of it was pretty boilerplate stuff, nothing surprising. But there was one clause that said that in the execution of my job, I would not promote birth control. What? How in directing a play would I end up promoting birth control? It was then I realized I was working at a Catholic university. Can you imagine saying to an actor or actress, you need to speak up, I can't hear you, and wear a condom, or articulate, I can't understand a word you're saying, and use birth control, take a pill. It's crazy. But for Catholics, the holiest of holy is the crucifix, and the opposite is a condom. I signed the contract. We all laughed, and I never mentioned condoms. Here in front of me, from 1912, is the Sisters of the Preservation Convent and School. The Sisters of the Preservation also came from Dublin, Ireland. They came to San Francisco to help the poor and the sick and to educate people. They had another facility, another part of the city, but it burned in 1906 during the earthquake and fire. This facility was built for them shortly thereafter. Isn't it magnificent? A glorious classical temple executed in wood. And I love these cherry trees. If you come back here in the spring, they are gloriously pink in front of this beautiful building. Well, eventually, the Sisters of the Preservation, of the Presentation, moved out of this building, up the street to their own convent building, and they moved the school to another building called Presentation High School. They get their name, the Sisters of the Presentation, from the presentation of the Virgin Mary by her parents in the temple in Jerusalem. We're now coming up on the convent of the Sisters of the Presentation, a completely modernist building just up the hill. A lot more room, but not quite as exciting as that incredible classical temple they had from 1912. There it is, the Sisters of the Presentation. Their former building, the classical building we were looking at, became Lincoln University. And eventually, even that went out of business, and it was bought by the University of San Francisco and became another University of San Francisco building. In front of us is the former Presentation High School, a Catholic private high school, which moved, and then even this building was bought by the University of San Francisco. So slowly, everything has been absorbed into the University of San Francisco. What a lovely building this is. It has a theater in it, the Presentation Theater. It also has the drama department in it, although they don't call it the drama department here. They call it the Department of Performance and Social Justice. Here, you're not just trained to act, you're trained to act for a purpose, to help people, to educate people, and not in Catholicism, but in healthy lifestyles and social justice. What a great idea for a program. In 2006, I was invited here to direct a production, and it surprised me that they asked me to come here and direct it. It's called The AIDS Show. The AIDS Show is a play that premiered at Theater Rhinoceros in 1982. In 1982, people didn't know anything about AIDS, but it was killing people. So the artists involved in death and survival, AIDS, created the AIDS Show to educate people, to amuse people, even in the middle of that horrifying pandemic. They wanted to help people understand how to promote and to enact safe sex. They also wanted to give a lighter side to all the death, show that people were still human in the midst of all this death. So here I was being asked by a Catholic university to come direct this gay show. I couldn't figure it out. But the whole university was doing a year dedicated to AIDS. Now, Catholicism has been very helpful in helping people deal with the AIDS pandemic. Irregardless of identity, sexuality, expression, they wanted to help people who were sick. So they dedicated this entire season to AIDS, an exploration of everything that's being done, the growth of AIDS in Africa, and also theatrical representations of AIDS. So I was invited here to direct this production of the AIDS show. Well, I thought that was great. I came here, and this is a naughty show. There's a lot of naughty behavior in it, but there's also a lot of instructional behavior. At the end of Act 1, there was a big song sung. It was called Safe Living in Dangerous Times. And what we did, this is in the script, is the cast was on stage and they were holding condoms, singing this song and throwing them into the audience. So I can't go in this building now because of the pandemic, but I'll do it out here in front of the building. Here's the finale to Act 1 of the AIDS show, the song Safe Living in Dangerous Times. Safe living in dangerous times. I'm throwing condoms into the audience. Safe living in dangerous times. I'm throwing condoms to Catholics in the audience. Safe living in dangerous times. Safe living in dangerous times. Safe, 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 safe. That was the end of Act 1. Well, the chancellor of the university, the president, was in the audience. He got up at intermission and walked out. Next morning, he called the head of the department into his office, a wonderful man named Peter Novak, and told him, what the heck was that? That was incredible. You have students on stage throwing condoms into the audience at a Catholic school? Peter said, well, that's the history of AIDS, educating people, being safe. That's in the show, it's in the script. John didn't make that up. The chancellor said, we have to figure out what we're going to say to the parents of those student actors when they complain about us teaching them about contraception. He said, look, it's in the script. The chancellor wanted to cancel the production, but Peter Novak said, no, we're going to continue. And we finished the run. It was amazing. One of the actors in the show was actually a monk. He lived up at Loyola House. He was great. He did the drag. He talked about sex. He threw condoms into the audience in that number. And one of his monk friends was in the audience that night. And he came running up to him after the show and said, hey, I got a condom. I got a condom. And the monk who was in the show said, well, I hope you're not going to use it. He said, no, of course not. But when's the next time I'm going to be holding a condom? This is great. I've never seen one before. I'm going to save this. That was the AIDS show at the University of San Francisco, produced by the Department for Performance and Social Justice. Now, I've often wondered about the weird nature of Catholicism in America. It's got kind of a bad reputation, but it does wonderful things. University of San Francisco, the Department of Social Justice, the Sisters of Mercy, the Sisters of the Presentation. Catholicism has gotten a bad rap, deservedly so, because of priest abuses of young people, rape in the clergy, also because of their medieval attitudes towards women and homosexuals. But a place like USF, I think, is somehow magical, because this university is not necessarily about all those things. In Catholic dogma, at its most conservative, it's about helping people, social justice, social reform, outreach. I have to say that the University of San Francisco has made me feel much better about Catholicism. And I know it's a troubled institution, and I certainly detest the way they feel about me as a homosexual. But I've never felt unwelcomed or criticized or judged on this campus. I felt embraced, encouraged, and loved. On my right is Lone Mountain. The Spanish called it Divisadero. Divisadero means the place with a great view. I kind of like that name for it too. This mountain was covered with graveyards at one time, several different graveyards. Laurel Hill, the Greek Orthodox graveyard, the Masonic graveyard, and the Oddfellows graveyard. At the end of the 19th century, the city government was sick of the graveyards. They said it was unhealthy. Well, that really wasn't the reason they hated it. They wanted to get rid of the graveyards so they could sell the property and make money. In 1901, they said no more bodies could be buried here. In 1937, 47,000 bodies were exhumed from Lone Mountain, Divisadero. They were taken to Colma and dumped into a mass grave, which is now covered over by a Walmart parking lot. The headstones and the funeral statuary was broken up and thrown into the bay to be used as a breakwater. And some of it was taken to my park, Buena Vista Park, and used to line the sewer drains. That was the fate of the Lone Mountain cemeteries. A historian called it one of the most outrageous cultural desecrations in the history of San Francisco, if not the greatest. We've arrived at the University Terrace. This is what connects the University of San Francisco with Lone Mountain. Look at that, the University Terrace. So if you look back behind us, you'll see San Ignatius there in the distance. You can just see the Campanile. And now you ascend to Lone Mountain. And up at the top is the former Lone Mountain College for Women, now part of the University of San Francisco. These are based on the Spanish Steps. Glorious, phenomenal. If you walk over here, there's a very interesting sign, and it says, "Be coyote aware." Yes, the coyotes are going crazy during COVID-19, so we're going to have to be careful. Joe, can you show us a picture of what this all looked like, Lone Mountain in 1910? This is a watercolor by the painter Alice Brown Chittenden. There's Lone Mountain in 1910. The graveyards were on the other side of the mountain. There's a cross on top and nothing else. Down at the base, you see some shacks and some tents. That's where people who were still homeless from the '06 earthquake and fire were living. Alice Brown Chittenden was an artist in San Francisco at the end of the 19th century into the 20th century, and her work was charming. Joe, can you show us the picture of the children on the beach? Her specialty, oh, look at that. Isn't that fun? Wonderful. Her specialty was paintings of wildflowers of California, portraits, and landscapes. We're now going to ascend to the top of Lone Mountain. This is the Ride o' Death. Again, we're entering private property, so we have to be aware of security guards, Jesuits, coyotes, and raccoons. Anything could happen. And also, this is the steepest hill I ride up in San Francisco. I hope we make it. I will tell you about Alice Brown Chittenden as we ascend. So here we go up the Ride o' Death. Alice Brown Chittenden was born in 1859. Her parents moved to San Francisco, where she went to high school. She evinced a great talent for drawing and painting in high school. When she got out of high school and was of age, she married, but she didn't like her husband. So a month before her daughter was born, she left him, moved back in with her parents, had her daughter, and eventually moved out and lived alone as a single mother raising a daughter. Her specialty, as I said, was paintings of the wildflowers of California, also portraits and landscapes. But she did 350 paintings of the wildflowers. These paintings were not only a gift to art, beautifully rendered, they were a gift to science, because even today they are studied so that botanists know what was then and what was now, what was here in the 19th and early 20th century, and what is still here and what is gone. She made a living by teaching at what would become the preeminent art school in San Francisco, the San Francisco Art Institute. She taught there from 1897 to 1941. She was truly a new woman, independent, interested in social reform, a suffragette, an inspiration to her students as an artist, but to also to all women that they could live alone, independently, and succeed. Her artwork won many awards and was shown all across the United States and in Europe. She truly inspiration to everyone she worked with. And we have now arrived at the top of Lone Mountain, this magnificent edifice at the top of the mountain. Every bit as charming in its way as St. Ignatius. I just made a reference to the San Francisco Art Institute. When COVID-19 started, it seemed like it was going to shut down for good. But apparently they've raised $4 million and are going to accept a new class. Thank goodness. It has survived. This is the former Lone Mountain College for Women, built in 1932. The funds were raised by the Sisters of the Sacred Heart. The architect is the terrific H.A. Minton, and it is a Gothic masterpiece. I just adore this school. I used to come up here and study in their library. I loved it. It was worth climbing every step of the University Terrace. What a glorious building. The Sisters of the Sacred Heart were founded by Mother Cabrini, and she became the first US citizen to become a saint. This school was meant to encourage the next generation of women like Alice Brown Chittenden to get an education, the sciences, the arts, and in literature. Well, the school struggled a lot. All female schools weren't doing well in the 60s. So in 1968, they became co-ed and started to admit men, but that didn't save the school. In 1978, the school shut down and it was absorbed into the University of San Francisco. Over there, behind that wing, is Loyola House. That's where that monk lived, the one who was in the show. Remember, his friend ran up to him after the show and said, I got a condom, I got a condom. They both lived in Loyola House. What enlightened monks they have here. Well, in 2017, yet another body was exhumed from Lone Mountain. It was the body of a little girl, not even 3 years old. They didn't know her name. She was in a beautiful little casket with a glass window on it. Well, the coroner smashed the window because it was a suspected crime. And they only realized it after they had broken the casket that the little girl had died in 1876. Nobody knew her name, so she was called Miranda Eve, an unidentified body. I'm looking down to where the body was discovered. She was in the Oddfellows Cemetery, that portion of the cemetery that belonged to the Oddfellows. Her body was so well preserved that they could see that she had blonde hair. Her skin was preserved, and she was holding in her hand a purple nightshade flower. That was what was in her hand when she was found. Purple nightshade flower. Also scattered in the coffin were eucalyptus and roses. The body was reburied in Colma. And a good friend of mine, Henry Rosenthal, who I mentioned earlier, who advised this fisheye lens, is an Oddfellow. And he was one of the people who officiated at that ceremony, sprinkling purple nightshade flowers into her grave. Here's a picture of Henry Rosenthal in his Oddfellows uniform at the burial of Miranda Eve. Well, it turned out that actually she had a name. Investigations were made, and it was determined that she had died of massive malnutrition. What? She was underfed. But apparently, that was an indication that she had died of a disease, a victim of yet another pandemic. So here we are back at Lone Mountain College, looking at this glorious edifice. A relative was found for this little girl. And through DNA testing, they determined that he was the great-great-grandnephew of the little girl. He lived in Mill Valley. DNA testing taught that. And they found out that her name was actually Edith Howard Cook, the little girl, the last exhumed body from Lone Mountain. Well, we've made it up here. Some interesting things from my research. I finally found something that I always had suspected. I always thought that probably Julia Morgan, that wonderful architect, was a lesbian. But of course, people didn't talk about that sort of thing, right? They never said anything like that back then. So there was no evidence. Well, just this morning, in doing some last minute research on Julia Morgan for this project, I found mentions of one of her lovers, a female. Julia Morgan was in fact a lesbian. Also, something else I discovered about this university is that it was the first Jesuit institution of its kind, the first university to offer health benefits to the spouses of gay people. How enlightened is that? So here we are at the top of Lone Mountain, and I thought, in tribute to Julia Morgan and to this wonderful university, which in the midst of so much Catholic failure continues to inspire somehow, that I would raise a queer flag and bless it with the sanctions and the approvals, at least for tonight, of the gay community. Well, I remain ambivalent about many things Catholic. But I have to say, and the reason I want to bless this place is it's always been kind to me, showing me love, encouragement, and endless approbation. I think of all those condoms flying into the audience. I think of me playing Tom Sawyer and finally learning how to sing. I think of all the wonderful friends I made here and all the fun I had. And I have to think there's something very nice happening at University of San Francisco. So let the Catholic world do what it wants away from here. This seems a uniquely San Francisco Catholic institution that somehow, at least from my perspective, works. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'm John Fisher, and this has been Lone Mountain. This is our 44th Essential Services project here in San Francisco. My solo work every Thursday night. We also do reading series, and we have a new play, The Review, opening next week. We hope you can join us for that. I think it's going to be wonderful. It's all about the modern art world. So kind of a nice tie-in with all the art that was discussed in this project. If you'd like to make a donation to our theater to support it in these troubled times of COVID-19, we'd certainly appreciate your support. You can mail a check to me at my COVID-19 office, John Fisher, Theater Rhinoceros, 91 Central Avenue, number 102, San Francisco, California, 94117. Or go online to our website, therhino.org, THERHINO.org, and make a donation there on PayPal. But more than anything, thank you for being such a terrific audience. I'll be back next week with a piece called Salamander. And then we have the review, beginning performances next Friday, January 22nd. You won't want to miss that. Buy your tickets now. I think it's going to be terrific. Again, have a pleasant evening. Coming to you from Lone Mountain in San Francisco, I'm John Fisher. Good night. Thanks, Joe.